Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Leadership Synergized, where we talk about rhythm and model of leadership that I've termed as STILL. We're going to get into the detail of what each letter stands for and means with our special guest, Ms. Shateena Love. Ms. Love, welcome back, and thank you so much. What a great episode last week.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to this week. Last week was wonderful.
You did a great job and a lot of value add there. And Ms. Love talked about 23 years as an educator. She worked in the insurance area before. And I had no idea those insurance card fonts were regulated because I keep a magnifying glass beside my bed to read those type of things. So
They are.
that was a great learning. But Ms. Love, you talked a lot about some of the key pieces for turnaround situations, particular time and just being aware of time. For individuals out there who may be ready to step into a turnaround situation, what's one piece of advice you could give them as they begin the process of moving from where they currently are to what the future might hold?
Yeah, the one piece of information I would give is you are not an island to yourself, and you do not know everything that needs to happen, nor do you have to do everything that needs to happen. Turnaround work is very much heart work and hard work. And often within turnaround work, you're dealing with so many environmental challenges that if you try to be the answer to every question in every situation, you would not be successful. You have to rely on what as much as your team knows. You cannot be the smartest person in the room, but then also you have to rely on things outside or outside of education. And when I say that, strategies around business models, you have to educate yourself around business models, around change and turnaround and transformation, and utilize those strategies as well as those instructional strategies that you have learned.
Yeah, you hit upon a great point, and I have fallen victim to this as much as I've tried to tell myself. And in reality, I'm not one that feels like I'm better than others when it comes to those pieces. But sometimes you fall into the trap as a leader, whether it's in education or not, to where you may look at it and say, my team is really overloaded. I'll just take care of this, or they're not going to buy into this, so I'll take this route. And what I have always found is especially when someone else had greater talents than I had around an area or topic, I just made a worse situation that they had to come back and make better in the future. But so much value in knowing the strengths of your team members as well, so you know who to go to in those settings.
Absolutely. There is a question that someone asked, someone said, I don't know who or if it's a famous quote or not, but they said, when you're given a task, you ask yourself two questions. The first question is, can I do it? And if your answer is yes or no, you ask yourself, is there someone who can do it better? And if there is somebody that can do it better, then you go and let that person do the work. So
I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
mhm.
I just love the first letter of my rhythm of leadership model of STILL is the S piece. And it really focuses around self-awareness, but in particular of serving self. And it's not serving self in a selfish way. It really, when I reflect back on the opportunities I had in life, and I wasn't deserving of any of them. They were because of individuals who saw something that I didn't, because of the people God placed in my life. So serving self for this model is about how can I bring more value to me so I raise the value I have to serve others with. Talk a bit about your experience there. What obstacles, or how do you ensure that you don't forget about growing your own strengths and values to bring it to others?
Mm. Yeah, I think when you mention growing myself so that I can grow others, it goes right along with I don't ever want to be the smartest person in the room.
Mm.
And then a personal challenge that I have is I loathe the idea of incompetence. I don't want anyone to think that I'm incompetent. And with that, I'm always striving to learn more, to be able to experience more, to expose myself to more, which leads to my reason for pursuing my doctorate. And even my doctorate is not necessarily in education, it's in organizational leadership, but it is really about, as I've done this work in education, as I have a proven track record for transformational leadership in education, I still want to learn and formalize my learning from the application to the more formal space and being able to expand my thoughts, expand my ability and my skills. And so it is not about being the smartest. I will restate that. It is not about being the person in power, because in actuality, I don't have to pursue my doctorate to be at the level of work that I am right now. And I only have about 7 years left in education. So I could really coast out, but I always want to be a learner. I've always want to be able to absorb information so that I can share it with the next person, because this work that I do is not about me elevating. Every space that I've had the opportunity to elevate into, I've been asked to come into that space. And so I do believe that God has ordained me and ordered my space, my steps to be here. And so I want to be able to build and pour into others as well. And so I have the application of the work. I have the experience of the work, but I also want to be able to provide some formal technical information and supports to others as well.
Thank you, Ms. Love said. And back to being the smartest person in the room, I've heard many leadership experts, including John Maxwell, state that if I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room. I got to go next
Absolutely.
door in that regard. So I love that piece. So beyond pursuing degrees, what other ways do you go about building your skills, whether the external skills or the internal skills?
Mhm. I often will find myself, I participate in some outside of education opportunities. I have a sorority that I am a member of, and I love to participate with them. But we do things beyond just community service. That's a huge part of our work, but we also provide opportunities to learn from each other. So we, within the organization, we have experts in multiple fields that offer supports and courses. That's things that I do outside of the educational realm, whether it's financial courses, self advocacy type courses. I love that work. I love to be a community leader. And so I will often participate in opportunities to learn how to activate the community and be able to participate in spaces, sometimes political, sometimes not. So I love to learn from others in that way, because I do not, as much as I am a leader, I am much more the background singer in every other space. I don't have to be on the stage all the time. So I appreciate learning from others. Internally, I am a personal statement. I'm an only child. And so I spend a lot of my time in meditation and reflection. I do, I, I want to have clear thoughts, and I want to be able to hear and discern what's happening around me. And so I've learned to just sit still and be quiet. And in that self-learning to just be still, I have the opportunity to learn more about myself, or just be in tune to things that busy people or busy Shateena would not pay attention to.
Thank you, Ms. Love. When you talk about education, one of the key aspects is, and really as a leader overall, it's the ability to influence others in education, staff members. You talked about in last week's session, school community members, district leaders, boards, but it's also about influencing self in that regard. And many leaders and teachers and educators I've spoke to talk about how difficult it is to influence, to inspire, and to allow that to build into a transformative process. With your record of success in turning schools around when it comes to state accountability metrics, you must have a very natural talent when it comes to influence and inspiration.
I don't know how natural it is. I think I've honed that ability. And in the work that I have had the opportunity to lead, often we have very dismal thoughts. We have very negative thoughts that surround us. And so I know in order to move the work, I have to change the energy. I have to change the perception. And so I've learned to take a stance of gratitude. I've learned to take a stance of high expectations and articulate that. I've learned to be very clear and intentional about the abilities of others and what they can bring in my understanding. And so I employ all of those opportunities along with being able to do the work myself. There's beyond specific content work in the space of education. And when I say that, I mean the physics, the calculus, that level of work. Beyond that, I'm not afraid to do it. And that in and of itself is a huge influencer and motivator. Someone that is not a director of the work, but a leader in the sense of I will lead, I will do, you follow, and we will get it done together.
How much, when it comes to influencing and inspiring others, how much does having the ability to truly connect and come alongside matter or make a difference in how successful you can be there?
It matter it's a huge part. If we were to put it on a percentage scale, I would say it's probably 70 to 80%. Because people want to be seen, people want to know that they matter. And so that's a huge part of the work that I do, whether it's a good morning and a recognition, whether it is a space where I write some type of letter or a note to say, I see you, thank you. How's the family? Being able to connect with a conversation that I may have had a week or two ago about a family member, but being able to bring that back up and make those connections is hugely important. And equally, honesty
Hmm.
and accountability. And so, honesty and accountability in a space that will allow the person to be vulnerable, will allow us to connect and say, okay, now what's next? And these are my promises and my commitments to you. And what are your commitments to me? And we are able to operate in that space. I have seen that go so much further than gifts and tokens. Commitment, trustworthiness, a safe space to fail, a place to be vulnerable, but also confidentiality. And so those are the things that I lean on to help build relationships, to help influence others, to gain that level of buy-in to move the work forward.
Yeah, what you're describing is that intrinsic motivation aspect that in many areas we find missing, not just in education, but I hear you speaking to the value of connection.
Oh, yes.
Talk about someone who impacted you to help you understand the value of making that connection and those relationships if you're going to succeed as an educator or even as a leader.
I would have to go all the way back to second grade. I had Miss Rich. She was my guidance counselor. And so had my mom and dad were going through a divorce and she just took me in. And so I've always looked at education as a safe space. I've always looked for those persons that are safe to me. And then I can fast forward to high school. Dr. Willis was my dean of girls. And the way she handled us and had expectations for us as young ladies, academically, instructionally, just behaviorally. She did it in such a loving and nurturing way that you couldn't help but be want to make her proud. And ironically, she and I became colleagues, and then she eventually went on to be my deputy superintendent. So there are connections that have happened over my span of, and those are just two ladies. I have many more, but those connections have helped me realize that this work that I do is so important.
Thank you for sharing. They obviously have done a wonderful job. For someone of your stature to mention them is fantastic. The first L in the still rhythm of life is about love. The God focus on God with love, family, others, self in that aspect. And recently I was speaking to about 25 individuals at a retreat, and one of the questions I received was, that's a wonderful model. It works. But then you come back and you go back to the S and serve self. How do you go about replenishing? Because that's a lot of fatigue and energy. Not that it's not fun, it's draining at times because you never know when the opportunities. You can't just put a schedule together and say at 8 o'clock today, I'm going to bring love to this person or that time. But you talked just a moment ago about meditation and reflection. There's a lot of things that pull when I try to do that and stay consistent with it. Would you mind sharing with us how you make a process work and what your process is?
Sure. So I'll start with work. I am intentional, and this is a skill that I've learned probably within the last 4 or 5 years. I make sure that I schedule time for myself. As a principal and as a principal supervisor, there's often the constant pull on you from the time you wake up in the morning and you get the first text that buses are going to be late until you return home and you get the call that somebody didn't make it home that night, or there was an issue at the school and you have to go back out. And so to give yourself space and grace to say, you know what, for this hour, I'm going to sit in my office and it's going to be okay. I'm going to be productive. I'm still going to get my work done, but I'm going to sit and it's going to be okay. So from a work space, to give yourself permission to slow down and stop so that you're not on the constant railroad of doing something. And it's okay to schedule lunch on your day, during your day. I vary that time. It's not the same time every day because I know that things happen. However, I make sure to schedule something. If it's 30 minutes, if it's an hour, if it's an hour and a half, I think I've hit the jackpot. But I do make sure to be intentional. When it comes to my personal life, I am an introvert, but I am an extrovert when it comes to my family. So I don't have to be in the space of other people, but amongst my family, I'm the life of the party. But again, I'm an only child. And so I have to know when I need to recharge my battery. That looks different at different moments. It may be just binge watching television, and it's okay. It may be walking in the park or going on a nature trail, and it's okay. And so those are spaces that as a leader, especially as a school leader, you are constantly pulled. Your senses are heightened constantly from the time you wake up in the morning until the time you go to bed. And even in that time, your brain is not resting, it's still on the go. And so we have to be intentional. I use a tool, the Eisenhower's matrix, to help organize my time during the day. And that has been a game changer for me. And I make sure that I prioritize my work. I make sure that I delegate the work. I also identify what I don't need to do and leaving space for those emergent, urgent opportunities. But then once I title out my day, that way I identify my priorities, I also give myself space and grace to just sit and be quiet. And it may not be every day, but I try to make sure I schedule it so that if that opportunity comes, I take advantage of it.
Wow, what great value. Thank you for sharing that. A lot of wisdom in that piece. And I want to build on just one thing, and then we'll move to wrapping up and talk about what's next for Ms. Love, soon to be Dr. Love in that piece. But you talk about that, finding that space for self. And then you alluded to there's so much noise around us at times where others may feel something's a priority when we're trying to get that space. And I think Dr. Stephen Covey talks about keeping the main thing. And when you're trying to replenish your soul, your mind, and your heart, that's the main thing. And it can be difficult. I know I have stepped back many times and knew I didn't have the level of energy or the value that I needed focus wise to bring. And I allowed those other views of priorities to pull me away. And I cheated the individuals out of the performance level they should have had. And I would encourage anyone, if you're battling that aspect, find a way. Maybe it's a tool like the Eisenhower matrix. Maybe it's a formal process of ways, so to speak, from where individuals know you like to sit to watch TV or like to take a break in that regard. Maybe it's a change of routine in that aspect.
I agree. One thing that I did mention that I'll definitely say, finding that thing that brings you joy. My husband and I, we love water, blue water, Atlantic coast, murky water. It doesn't matter. As long as we can get to the beach and some water, we do that. And so over the last 10 years, we've been very intentional about making sure that we schedule our vacations. Now, he's also an educator. He's a head football coach. And so his year goes nonstop from about the end of July through December. And then he coaches another sport in the spring. And so we're very intentional about carving out time for us. No phones, no worry about what's for dinner, just to be able to just reset ourselves so that we can come back and provide the level of expectation or the expectation of us, because we're both expected to perform at a very high level. So just being very intentional about that and not feeling guilty. I think as leaders and as educators, we have been trained in this space that anytime we take time for ourselves, we are slighting or discounting someone else. And I want all of us as educators to release ourselves, as leaders, to release ourselves of that guilt. That's a guilt that the world has put on us. And I really feel like God has put us in a space, in a place not to run ourselves ragged and be totally drained all the time so that we're not good for ourselves or our families. And so if that guilt comes back around, you can, I would say, I'm going to do it anyway. And I come back with a smile on my face and I get the work done. And so I used to be the person that would wonder, I would have a colleague that would take a vacation in October. School started in August. How are you taking off a week of work? You're a principal. Who does that? And I didn't understand it, but he was always the most pleasant person, the most polite person. And he was like, you have to give yourself the space and grace and opportunity to disconnect. And I started doing that, and life has been so much better. So I will say to all leaders, your demand and the level of expectation of you is so high that you have to be able to give yourself space and grace and permission to step away and come back even better.
Space and grace and serving self is all about servanthood to bring the
Absolutely.
highest level possible to others. I love that. And I have fallen down way too many times there, Ms. Love. You just described the epitome of what I've always reached for in that regard. But thank you for sharing that and the positivity. And I think what I'm hearing you say, you and your husband, you've made it a habit and it's a way of life. It's
It
not an
is.
exception.
Yep, it absolutely is. We try to take 2 to 3 vacations a year. We love the Caribbean. So anywhere we can go Caribbean, we try to do that. But if not, we will try to do Florida to like the Gulf of Mexico. But that's what we enjoy. Someone may have a different enjoyment, whatever that is. It doesn't matter. Do that thing. Take time and just enjoy it.
I love it. Space and grace and do that thing, right? That's what it's all about in that piece. So before we get away, Ms. Love's not done with growth. What's next for you? Obviously, you're working for your doctorate, but what's beside that or beyond that?
Yeah, so that is my main focus now. I'm resetting myself after transitioning back to the space that I'm in now in central Atlanta, metro Atlanta area. And beyond this, I want to be able, I truly enjoyed being a principal supervisor. And so I would want to be able to go back to that space because I think that with my current work, what I'm doing now around equitable learning environments and still coaching leaders, to be able to go back and be even closer to students and leaders and with this level of understanding that I'm gaining now in skill set, I think it would be phenomenal, have a huge impact for our students. I also, when I look forward, I do think about doing some adjunct work once my life starts to slow down, because I do believe, this is no slight to any professor, wink, doc, but I do believe that we do have so many professors teaching in the colleges of ed that have been so far removed from the trends of today that I would want to be able to go back and be able to help with some of those college of eds around what's happening now beyond the theory of the work and more around the practicum of the work.
You know, that term, the practicality aspect is where education's at today in that regard. There's very little time in the theoretical aspects anymore because it really goes back to the self-awareness piece. And Ms. Love, I've told a number of people as I coach and train that I used to be one that thought self-awareness was a one-time thing in life, right? But it's become, I think, it's in every moment. It's a need in every moment thing. It's the same way in education. We don't have time to lose a day, a week, a month, let alone a year. It's got to be now in that regard, practically.
Absolutely. It has to be now. The urgency is right now because we have, there's an old African proverb, and I stopped to say that questions, how are the children? That's the question when the warriors come back from battle. And so they know that if the response is the children are okay, then everything is okay. But they know that if they get a response, the children are not well, then there's a problem. And I wonder, what is the response now? Our children are not well in many spaces. And so we have to do something to change that.
That's powerful. Thank you for that. Wow. 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 You've left us with so much wisdom, but I'm going to ask you one thing maybe that comes to mind, something you haven't discussed, you haven't mentioned, or maybe you want to build upon from another comment. One piece of advice for tomorrow's growing leader.
Mm. One piece of advice, we talked about it, just being self-aware and having self-love
Mm.
for yourself and having a level of humility, because this work, again, I will say, is heart work and it's hard work, regardless of where you are, regardless if you are in a school environment that is affluent or in a school environment that is challenged and economically challenged. This work is hard, and you will have different issues and concerns that you have to be well enough mentally, physically, intellectually to be able to balance and handle them. And so, in that self awareness, understanding all the demands that you have, but loving yourself in the process, because if you're in it for the right reasons, the reward will be great.
Thank you for those words of wisdom. Wow. Thank you so much for joining us for these 2 episodes of Leadership Synergized. Ms. Love, a track record of sustained success, and the children and the staff members are blessed to have you.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, and all the best with your doctorate. I know in short order it's going to be Dr. Love, and we'll have to do another episode and talk about that piece and the gain, and maybe even research your research study a little bit. How's that?
I would love for that opportunity. Just let me know when later.
Absolutely. Hey, I appreciate you. God bless you. And thank you all for listening. And I hope you've taken away just a pot of gold from Ms. Love these past 2 weeks. But the whole focus on Leadership Synergized is really just to understand that rhythm of life, rhythm of leadership, we have it. We just
Absolutely.
can succeed by being still. That doesn't mean we're not moving. Sometimes that stillness is replenishing, it's reflecting, it's meditating. But we have to be our best and raise the bar on our potential growth if we expect to multiply value in others for them to multiply. Still allows us to do that. Thank you, Ms. Love. Thank you all for watching. God bless. I appreciate you all.
Thank you.